through, which is oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Should be coming through. Um, it looks like for right now, at least, it is just me. Let's make sure that the stream is set up properly. All right. People are watching. It's not waiting anymore. We are live. Um, all right. Well, seeing as it's just me, maybe this will be a short one today. We'll see. Other people might stop by from the core team if they get the chance. But we're just gonna go ahead and dive in with kind of the status of things. But I guess actually I should learn this from previous streams. Somebody should confirm that I sound normal and audio's good and all that before I waste a bunch of breath and then find out that my audio is not working. So let's get that first. Chat, help me out. Tell me if you can hear me. Tell me if my voice sounds silky smooth. No? Anybody? Come on. Perfect. Thank you. Always helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, let's go ahead and just dive in with the updates, what everybody's working on. Since it's just me, we typically will kind of go around and see what's being worked on by the core team. What I am working on is 25 different things at any one given time. But the big epic sort of for Ash is generators, and that's centered around the project Igniter, which is going really well. I'm working on that today, and I'm hoping to get the Ash launcher or the Ash installers and generators and all that shipped by either tomorrow or Monday, which will be 3.1 of Ash. There's still a lot of installers and a lot of different things we might want to add, and so we'll probably have a period of time where we just are going to add those. For example, Igor, who's on the call, or who's on in the chat, I mean, has been doing stuff. All right, now it's working again, but I clearly need to fix this. Let me see if I can change the device and just use my AirPods. As much as I don't really want to do that, but let's see. All right, how does that sound? Does that sound okay for everybody? It's not ideal, but maybe it'll be okay. All right, we're gonna have to roll with this. Let me know if the balance is off because I haven't tweaked these. I've tweaked for that microphone. Um, I'll rewind a little bit. Igor's been working on the Ash Money installer. The Ash Money installer is going to help a lot because people are currently having problems with. Oh, it's not ideal. Oh my gosh. All right, is it too quiet? It's okay. It's just okay. Here, let me. Why don't I turn this thing off and on again and see if I can get my audio device working again. 1 second. Off and on. Set this up. Oh, this might be. Let's see. Let's try this. It might have been a power consumption issue. All right, let me switch back to. Okay, We're gonna see if we can't get this working again on the original device. I think it was like my phone was plugged into the same USB device to make sure that it stayed connected to my the same USB dock. And I think that that may have been like drawing too much power or something to power my audio converter. So this should be better. I'll let you guys confirm or deny. Okay, going back again. Um, Ash Money installer is going to be great. Thank you, Igor, for getting that going. Going to help a lot of people, and we need to add installers and scripts and generators and stuff for a lot of our other packages. I think Ash Authentication is the big one that is going to be really useful for that because there's a lot of setup involved in that package. And we're also considering adding some entirely new features now that we have Igniter. For example, like mix Ash Authentication eject that'll like generate live views for you or generate, kind of whatever based off of your current configuration so that you can kind of get, just customize it fully instead of what we have right now where you either have to use generated stuff, which is only good so far, or you have to just handwrite something. So I think that's going to be a big benefit when we get there. May or may not happen as part of this push. On top of that, I've been working a lot on Ash JSON API and Ash Phoenix. Ash JSON API has got more and more users. I was never a big fan of how it kind of didn't get as much love as Ash GraphQL. Just a lot of people are using Ash GraphQL, and they are. It's just a lot of tooling around it, and I think a lot of people want to use it. But Ash JSON API actually has amazing tooling as well that we just haven't had a chance to really kind of put the polish on. So I've been doing that, supporting generic actions in Ash JSON API, getting the Open API stuff like fully spec'd out. When you set, yeah, so I'll answer that question in a second. So Ash JSON API is a very viable alternative, and I would even kind of suggest starting there if you're not sure. Like, don't pick Ash GraphQL over Ash JSON API just because kind of GraphQL is the hot new thing. Like, Ash JSON API is a nice package. It's very like minimal compared to what you have to do to get Ash GraphQL working. It's a much simpler package. Like GraphQL APIs are much more complicated internally, all that kind of stuff. So. And now that we have proper Open API, everything's set up. It's all really nice. That's actually really good if you're trying to build like, I don't know, AI apps where you can point Open API Open AI or whatever, however they do that. You can like point them at your Open API specification to let them like use your API, right? All these kinds of things are quite, JSON API is getting more momentum. So been working on that. And then I have some Ash Phoenix stuff still pending, which is stuff to help with sorting forms and supporting generic actions in Ash Phoenix.form, which will be very useful. So Michaelis, I probably did not pronounce that correct, I'm sorry, but asked a question in the chat, which is when you set the types, can you define custom types and how would that be handled? When you're asking about setting the types, you just mean like in resources in general, or do you mean like, yeah, like in what context are you talking about custom types? Because we definitely have custom types, and they're supported. They have a bunch of different things. Like you can, if you're using custom types with Ash JSON API, you can define a Mikolas. Got it. Thank you for letting me know. So Ash JSON API will actually ask your type, hey, what's your JSON schema? That kind of thing, right? So there's a lot of really powerful tools there. So custom types are super, super rich. Yeah, and in Ash Admin, so the question was about Ash Admin. I don't think we give you a way in Ash Admin to like control the rendering for custom types. But if by custom types, I think maybe are you talking about new types like ash.type.newtype? Because that gets rendered automatically like appropriately according to the subtype. So if you make a new type of union that is a union of like 4 or 5 different things, it'll render the unions in Ash Admin. Like it knows to peek through new types, which is useful. Um, okay, what else are we working on? I mean, that's actually, I mean, that's the gist of it, right? Like we've Ash Core. I'm dealing with a couple bugs here and there, but generally speaking, it's stabilized a lot since the launch of 3.0, which is great. Um, we're kind of at the point where we don't actually need to do much for um, like Ash Core is mostly done, like minus some optimizations and improvements to things sort of at the edge. But I think we're getting to a point after the next couple of point releases. I have to make some optimizations and fixes and quality of life things. But we're getting to a point where like the feature set is quite stable. So we're going to be working on other packages primarily is the ideal. Going back to Mikolas's question, he was saying it's actually more like figuring out custom UI for custom types. The answer to that is no. We don't have any way for you to inject custom UI into Ash Admin. And frankly, we probably never will, um, because um, it admin UIs in general, especially if you're trying to put them in front of like the only time you want like pretty fancy new UIs is when you're trying to put them in front of customers, generally speaking. And we believe that you should build your own admin UI. We don't really think that you should like use an off the shelf one to provide to your customers. Now that doesn't mean that we can't find ways to improve it and make it better and all that sort of stuff, right? And maybe we will get to that point, but it's going to be a long time. Um, but we don't want it to be so customizable that you can dig yourself into a hole. Like, oh, it's almost exactly right, but it needs to add this one little option. And if it adds that one little option, then I'll be able to do exactly what I want. And you're going to end up in that sort of hellscape of trying to customize a tool to fit like a customer need. And so we don't really want people to be in that situation. So Ash Admin is kind of like almost zero config. You just kick it up. It does exactly what it says it does on the tin. It's more like a super admin dashboard than like the sort of thing you'd expose to customers. Um, and if we do make a admin dashboard that we want people to show to customers, probably that will be built as more like a toolkit, like a bunch of components, like data table and resource header and all these sorts of things that you can kind of put together to all these things you can kind of push together to build your own admin UI without having to do all the nitty gritty. So that's probably what that'll look like in the long term. Um, so Hexagon Statistics is asking, what is Ash? It's a big question. The right answer kind of depends on where you're coming from. Like if you already know what some of the technologies were built on is, but it's an application development framework for Elixir. So it's not a web specific framework, but it's like a framework for architecting and designing your application layer. So it's kind of can be seen as similar to an ORM in some ways. Although ORM doesn't make as much sense as a term in Elixir, which is a functional immutable language, right? So we don't map state in one service to a object that has like a life cycle, really. But it does kind of sit in the same place in your application. And it comes with all sorts of tools to automatically build all sorts of things from your definitions. The primary abstraction we have is called ash.resource, which describes some domain object and allows you to automatically get like an API for it, like a JSON API or a GraphQL API or an admin UI or blah 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 blah. If you're familiar, the closest corollary might be something like Django in Python, where it's very different from a technical standpoint, but in terms of this idea of sort of write it once and leverage that declaration is very similar mindset. Right. Well, I mean, because it's just me, none of the other core team members can make it. Apparently, not even one of them. No. I don't have that much, so it's gonna the questions are gonna have to keep this going. I can vamp for 45 minutes if you guys really want me to. Like I can find stuff to talk about, but I feel like, these are office hours, so you guys and gals should bring up some questions. Come on, what do you got? Give me your worst. Who's my favorite guitarist? Um, it's a good question. My favorite guitarist these days is the tallest man on earth. He's a singer songwriter. I really like his stuff, and he's amazing on the strings, and he's also a great singer. Um, Jesse Williams asking, I'm curious if you know what JavaScript tooling people in general are using to interact with AshJSON API, i.e., parsing out includes. Fun fact: I have no idea, actually. My because my perspective is like I have not yet actually built a client, like a front end client, leveraging AshJSON API, like a client in a different language, and that's mostly because like I've been doing a lot of live view, and when I generated a JSON API, it's usually for somebody else. Like one of my projects, so we need some integration that needs to use an API, and so uh, I just can easily get them a JSON API in like 10 minutes, basically. Like if you know how the tooling works, you can build APIs in like absurdly fast periods of time that are like good APIs. It's pretty wild. And so for me, I don't tend to be the consumer of those APIs as much as the builder of them. I know some tools are out there, but you'll have to kind of pull the rest of the community, I think, to get a good answer. Whip2SO, work in progress, aren't we all? Has asked, will Igniter be happy taking over and modifying non-Igniter generated projects? Yeah, absolutely. It's less about, it's not so much that like Igniter sort of like owns or encapsulate your project or anything like that. It's more like it's a tool set for people to write generators that are more reactive to the current state of your code. So you can create a project, like you could take a 2-year-old project and run like mix igniter.install ash, and it will patch existing files and it will do like a best effort, like you can't do that sort of thing perfectly, but it'll do sort of a best effort to make the right changes in the right places and to give you warnings and say like, hey, I couldn't change that file because it didn't look the way I expected it to. And so you're going to have to make this change yourself. So there's really no problem with working with a project that was generated without Igniter being in place. And I think that that's actually really important. It's more about making just better generators, not so much about making a project shell or a container or anything like that. So it definitely doesn't own any of your stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's all about parsing and patching so that we make semantic changes. And this actually has a lot of really powerful implications, and we're using some great tooling to accomplish this, which is like what we do is like we actually will use aliases in your code. If you said like alias myapp.repo and we like add a block of code somewhere and it contains like myapp.repo, it'll detect that myapp.repo has already been aliased and it will replace it with just repo. So we'll like use the aliases that are available in the code. So you get it's a much smarter merge and generator than sort of like a text based thing. And on the flip side of that, when one of the things it might do is you might say add a new value to a list. So like if you have like in your supervisor, you might have like a list of children, or in your config, you might have a list of modules. When we're comparing two modules, we know to look and see, well, like what is that? Is there an alias that's affecting that module name? We expand the aliases before we compare. So using source parsing and patching, and also this is a tool called Spitfire by Mitch Hamburg, which is using for NextLS. We're also actually like source aware and environment aware of any place where we're putting code. And so we can do certain things like know about imports and aliases and stuff. We're only right now supporting aliases, but we'll be able to do imports and all sorts of other things in the future, which I think is a very exciting way to do this, to go about this. Um, so Taha, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna say Taha is the first name. Because I'm gonna mangle that name. But I'm curious about the pace of minor updates. Releases would affect the adoption of Ash, as it might seem to be too many updates in a short time. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We have a long way to. We have a lot of things to do and a long way to go. And if that's off-putting, that's fine. Like we don't. If lots of minor updates a lot of the time is a problem, then I'm totally cool to, if that's a problem for somebody, then like you don't have to use Ash. It's not a big deal. We're also, even just trying to improve the Elixir ecosystem in general with as much as things that we can do. So like we're, with Igniter and Spark and other projects, and we've done IterX recently from James on the core team. So we're trying, like, we're not offended if the particular project doesn't fit with somebody's sensibilities or that sort of thing. But the truth is, those minor updates and the pace of them are not going to stop. We have just too much to do, too little time. We got like a 30-year roadmap if we want to, like, we have a really big vision for how these things are going to go and what it's going to look like in the future. Um, so my only advice is to like buckle up because, you know, I will say, like, kind of what I was mentioning earlier is that like the core Ash core is a lot more stable now. Like in like I don't have any plans for a 4.0 unless except for maybe there's like some small breaking changes or anything like that in the future. But I would consider core mostly feature complete. Like I'm not going to never say never. Like maybe we'll add some stuff, but generally speaking, the goal isn't to just like keep expanding the core package infinitely, right? So, even the past couple of weeks, like most of my work has been on other extensions. It's been on Ash JSON API, Ash Phoenix, Ash Postgres, right? So if that helps, I think maybe it's easier pill to swallow that like the core should receive less changes, mostly things like bug fixes and optimizations going into core. Um, then I mean maybe that makes it a little bit more palatable. But yeah, we're not going to stop making lots of improvements, right? And the goal is that those things will make everybody's life better. So, and we tend not to do breaking changes. Things happen by accident, but it, we try to honor Semver and not screw anybody's day up. So Ta is saying, don't get me wrong, I love it. I'm just curious about the community, and also Ash has the potential to get new people from outside the Elix community. Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of the people that have adopted Ash are adopting Elixir through Ash. Like they found something attractive about Ash, and that made them decide that they wanted to work on um, that. So it's an inroad for Elixir for sure. And I'm speaking at a conference soon called Carolina Codes, which is a just a programming conference in general. It's a language, not a language specific conference. So we're trying to sort of break out of the shell of only speaking at Elixir specific conferences because Elixir people all already are kind of red pilled. They know about Elixir and they love it already. So um, we definitely want to bring it out. Um, but yeah, and it's just I think it's interesting because it's like hard to optimize these things. What's the right way to phrase this? I can't really do things with the lens of like what will help adoption or what won't help adoption. Like thinking of adoption as like a target that should be hit. I'm not suggesting that you're saying that, but it's the reason for this is that like you never really know, right? Like some people look at a fast-paced moving project and they think, great, I'm going to have a lot of support. There's community around it, like, and some people look at a project that's moving fast and they think there's a lot of risk. And ultimately, like, I don't think of it in terms of like branding, but I stay true to like what I believe, which is that there's too much work to do to muck it up with, slowing things down for process. Like, I mean, we have good processes in place. Like we use Semver, we save breaking changes for major releases, but beyond that, like we're not going to I'm not going to do like every 1 month Ash gets a release, or, you know what I mean? Like there's just too much to do. So I stick true to that, and some people won't be interested. Some people will be interested, but ultimately I think it's the value that tips the scale, right? Like more and more, there's, Ash is packed with things that are valuable to tech teams. And it gets harder and harder to like adopt out of it, or not to choose not to use it, because you're just losing momentum for no good reason. Yeah, Mikolas says DHH had a good post about it, saying build cool shit with it and show it off. I tend to agree. We need to get more on the building cool shit. Like we do need more social proof, and we need all sorts of other things. But honestly, like, I already have too many hats. I'm going to leave that to you folks. You find folks, go and get rich on Ash. That's the best thing you can do for the framework. If you believe that it's a good tool and you want to give back to it, go get rich and tell people that we helped. So Igor says we need a 15-minute video for Ash. I completely agree. I said I was going to build this like a year and a half ago or something, but ultimately I think that our 15-minute video could go pretty hard. Like once Igniter exists, once we have our generators set up, and there's some other things that I'd be, I think that, we'll see some pretty cool stuff here before too long. Igor also says, before the Ash Postgres installer makes it into a release, I suggest one minor thing: only add the installed extensions if it's not already there. So that is, I intended for it to work that way. If it doesn't work that way, then it's a bug. So we should address that for sure. Just let me know. Let's see. Oh, it's interesting. There's like less things coming through on my chat. Oh, there it is. Wait. Okay, let's see. Okay. Whip, WLP, whatever, has a stupid long question. I'm just going to read this. An issue I have with Phoenix generators is how they kind of just fart a bunch of code into your app and leave you to maintain it. Have fun, kiddo. Flexibility is nice, but when it's something core like Phoenix auth, it feels like the library author has abdicated responsibility. If there's a security update or feature added, you have to monitor news for that and then go back and stitch things. Stitching yourself, generating a new project, looking at diffs, not uncommon. Would Igniter be the long-term solution for modding in new modules, features, fixes to generated code? Would this require buy-in from upstream? This is a really good question. What I would suggest is I would actually suggest that Igniter is not a replacement for, like, I don't agree with code generation as a best practice, right? I don't agree that Phoenix Gen Auth is the right way to provide authentication solutions to users for exactly the reasons that you described. And I think that it's easy, like what makes it difficult, right, is that it's like so easy to build like when you just generate code, you are actually reducing your own maintenance burden, I think, to a pretty significant degree, right? Which is they opt in once, and like nobody's going to come to you and say like, hey, I want this option added to this thing or whatever, right? Like they're going to go make the change to their own code. I personally don't agree with that strategy, and it's a reason that Ash is like 4 years old, and we don't have generators yet. Like still, like we have one generator in Ash Phoenix for generating live views, and that's going to get rewritten with Igniter. But I think that in general, we will have our installers and our upgraders and our patchers, but I still think that it is extremely important that we don't like almost take too much advantage of having those and say, oh, well, we'll just install it. We'll generate it, right? Because I think that's a way around a lot of problems, and it's not the real solution. And so I do think it would be a way to make things like Phoenix Gen Auth better, potentially, but the more you're expecting end users to deviate from what you generate, the harder it's going to be to patch in some sort of fix, right? And I think Mixed Phoenix Gen Auth is a great example where it would be very difficult to patch in a fix to that because users take it and they could restructure it, modify it, do all sorts of changes to it, right? Ash, for example, is highly regular. Like a resource looks like a resource pretty much every single time. And I think that I think that there's a lot that benefits the idea of generators a lot because adding an attribute to a resource looks the same, adding an action, modifying an action by a name, all these sorts of things are very easy to do structurally because of the way that Ash is built. Um, let's see. Taha says people are having fatigue from JavaScript because of the pace. So a lot of people who are running from JS because of it, but I'm in love with it. Um, yeah, I mean, I'd be exhausted by a deluge of low quality things too. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, and I think actually Mikolas says something below that it's fatigue coming more from the multitudes of choice. Um, and I do think that it's like it is an interesting point, but I think that we ultimately we have the value trade off for us is clear, right? Which is that there's too many things to do to slow down for that. And if you're not in for the ride, like that's fine with me. Um, let's see. Neg CX, I think. Ash is super interesting. Would love to understand a bit more about the escape hatches. Even using Ecto for migrations make me nervous. Having another layer on top feels like yielding a lot of control. E.g., how easy is it to control migrations and query the database in a more traditional Ecto way? Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's triviality, I think, generally speaking, right? So, like, there's nothing, like, Ecto still works the normal way that it always did, and all Ash resources are Ecto schemas also, and you don't have to use a migration generator. So, like, you can do whatever you want, really. And I mean, I think if you, like, there are lots of escape hatches to the point that you don't even have to use the Postgres data layer. You could just write your own raw SQL queries and use Ash as a way to like expose in some way your queries to, over an API or something like that, right? I think realistically there's a trade-off there that all comes down to like the quality of what the system is doing for you under the hood. Sometimes Ash makes the right choice for you. I would say most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't. And you kind of, in the same way that it's like we still all use the Postgres query planner, even though every once in a while it totally screws us over, right? We're like, oh shit, I can't use that. That query is like 99 times slower than it should be. And it's because the planner thinks something wrong or whatever, right? But we still just use the planner until it becomes a problem. And I think that's the general philosophy about Ash is in a lot of ways, it's kind of like the Postgres planner which is we have all these default behaviors and all of these derived decisions based on what we know about your application. And, like use us for the 80, 85, 90% of your app that is just normal stuff that you don't really need to worry about. And there's a reason that we didn't ship it like a sort of no code platform or something like that. It's like, it just lives inside of an Elixir app. So if you get to some bit of your stuff that you can't model or represent nicely, it's like Ash is just it's a subsystem. You don't have to use it for everything. In fact, like you shouldn't, I recently added Stripe integration to a personal application of mine. I didn't have anything to do with Ash, right? I didn't need Ash for any part of it. It just didn't even make sense to do. Taha saying about the migrations when working with a team, is there a way to have them working properly? So that's a good question. They do actually generally work well enough. What you need, it's just what you need to do is like, you need to rebase, like you need to make sure you're pulling in all of your changes. And you also need to make sure you give every migration a name. However, there is a ticket, something that we're going to do for Ash Postgres. It's been around for a while, but it's a quality of life thing, which is we're going to change the way that we track changes to resources for the migration generator. Right now it uses snapshots. And in the future, it's going to look for, it's going to be operations. And what that means is that right now, it's like the latest snapshot is sort of what we look at to see what the state of the world is. But in the future, we're going to stitch up all the operations. So if somebody on one branch adds an operation and you add an operation, it's not going to matter. They're going to merge properly. And the end result will be the same, and that's going to solve the parallelizable issue with the migration generator. Also, um, Dimitri, who does a lot of work for Ash, Manganov. I'm sorry if I'm messing up his last name, but he wrote a squash migrations or a squash snapshots command and a checker that will say like, hey, there should only be one snapshot for each resource, and he puts that in CI, and that can also really help. So basically, if you pull in changes from somebody else, and now there's two snapshots for a resource, your CI will fail, and you'll have to go like regenerate migrations in your branch. So that can at least solve the silent issue that sometimes can happen. It'll make it like a clear failure. Um, that's good to hear. Is there like a pronunciation for this WLP2S0? Is this like a vanity license plate that I could figure out? I don't see it, but they're mentioning that in place transitioning a sprawling legacy code base full of ecto schemas to use Ash incrementally, and it's working seamlessly so far, less a couple of GQL namespace collisions. Yeah, I could see how that would happen. Let me know if there's stuff we can do on our end to help with that. Um, yeah, Mikolas is saying, showing it is like we do need more guides showing like it's also difficult from my perspective. Like I've lived and breathed this for 4.5 years, 5 years, or however long it's been now, and people are like, "Oh, can I use Ecto and Ash together?" And for me, I'm like, I'm a Wi-Fi card lovingly placed into the second PCIe slot. Got it. Um, so uh, it is difficult for me. Sometimes I don't even think that people might think certain things, right? Like somebody's like, can I use Ecto and Ash alongside each other with an Ecto schema, and and I'm like, of course you can, right? To me, it's obvious, and I'm not suggesting it should be obvious to everybody else, but it can be really difficult. This is a theme that I've noticed, is that it can be really difficult for me, who's got all of this context. I mean, like, what are we at? Like 25 packages, and how many hundreds of thousands of lines of code or something, I don't know. And to me, I'm trying to, I keep it all in my head and load it up, and I don't know. I don't know what people don't know. I don't know what people need help with. And I think that's where we really need, especially with the project getting more and more adoption, right? And we're getting more and more people who need help, and we're getting more and more people who are looking to understand how this thing works. We need the community to step up, because I've often found like somebody will ask a question and I'll give what I think is the right answer. And I mean, usually I give the correct answer factually, but then what I didn't do was address the core misunderstanding that a person had, and people who have just recently had that misunderstanding themselves will do a better job of addressing that, right? So we really need the community, I think, to step in and that happens. Like I'm not saying that's not happening. There's like now, like probably 50% of the time I show up to Discord after going to bed at night, and all of a sudden it's like, you've got 25 people ask questions in Discord, and somebody's answered most of them. Yeah, so NEGCX says the docs make it seem like it's sort of this is your whole app type of thing, which is scary when you're not sure if that's the right fit. So all of these things are good to hear. Again, maybe a misreading on my part. Yeah, I mean, we should definitely have, I think, maybe like an escape hatches, or even just like some kind of some kind of like picture of how you do things that when they don't fit within sort of Ash land or whatever guide. In a way, Ash tends to become a pretty big piece of your application, but for good reasons, not for bad reasons, right? Not because you can't, but because often whenever you put something inside of an Ash resource or behind an Ash resource, you get so many benefits from doing so that you're like, oh, I've got this other thing. And you're asking yourself like, how can I get the same utility because I'm having to rewrite that, like I'm having to rewrite all this crap that Ash was already doing. So if I put my thing in the shape that Ash expects, then I can just get all of that stuff for free. And I think that that's so it's a bit of an infectious idea, but there's by no means any like forcing function that says like you have to do X, Y, and Z with Ash. And there's plenty of times where like the right answer is like go write a Phoenix controller that takes you're doing like webhooks and you want to just like, I don't know, like it's registering that some external event happened and you want to add it to a log. Like you could just write a Phoenix controller and use, repo.insert and bypass Ash entirely for that. So yeah, there's tons of escape hatches like that. And then internally to a resource, there's tons of escape hatches as well. WLP2S0 says, I have found that it inevitably becomes your whole app when you realize how convenient it is. Oh yeah, this is what I was saying. But I've broken out with the escape hatches to do wacky post-gist things. Yeah, I think a lot of times that's another thing that people also don't realize is like in a lot of ways, Ash can become like a sort of build your own framework, excuse me, type thing. And what I mean by that is like you can define custom Ash expressions that you can use in your expression language. You can define calculations using fragments. You can do all these, you can write your own extensions that will structurally modify your resources to make them meet some criteria that you have. And so in a lot of ways, like Ash is not a platform that has this concept of there's only one right way to do everything. And it's not, that sounds nice. I've worked in ecosystems where they thought that, and that's a benefit in a lot of different ways. But I've found that it usually means there's only one right way to do things. And if it doesn't work for you, you are shit out of luck. Like you need to go figure out something completely, fully unhinged and off the rails because there's only one way to do this, right? Like, so Ash does not adopt that. And so we talk, like the phrase I've used in the past is it's like, people say like Rails is omakase, right? Where it's, you do it the way that you get what the chef gives you. And I think Ash is more like Chipotle, where like we have a bunch of awesome ingredients and you can still only pick from a couple different formats, like a bowl or a salad or a wrap or whatever, right? But like, so it's not like, it is a framework. It is still running your code, but you have the ability to like make all sorts of modifications to the way that it does what it does. That's typically something that power users gravitate towards, right? It's not something that you start doing on day one, but it is an important capability. And so ultimately, like, there's a lot of times where, like, I wouldn't call that even an escape hatch. There's a lot of things that people will say are escape hatches, and they're more like working as intended. Like we were aware that when we built this, that we couldn't encapsulate every type of thing you could possibly want to do into, in our tool set. And so it's like we built it with a bunch of pre-built versions plus the custom one, so you could do whatever you wanted. And I think that's the critical sort of methodology that we've applied. Sorry, need some water. All right. If we don't have any questions, I'm going to end it. So you're going to keep it going. If you want, if you have any more questions, put them my way. I'm going to turn my fan on. It's hot in here. See if that affects our audio or not. All right, folks. I think we can call it here. I appreciate everybody's time. It's good hearing from the community, and I appreciate being able to answer your questions, and that you're all joining me for. I have one more thing. Sorry, I have one more very important thing that I totally forgot about, which is let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll put it in. the announcements page here. We've got 2 certificates of recognition to hand out. And I would like to announce those. One second. Okay. So our first one is for Rebecca Lee, which I was hoping that this would open. Oh, this doesn't open in the. It doesn't show a preview in Discord. I was hoping it would do that. So I can unfortunately not. I cannot share them with you because the setup I have is only showing the Discord window because I do client work on this machine, and so I can't just like share the whole screen without a bunch of prep. So with that in mind, I will just tell you who's getting the certificates of recognition this month. We have Rebecca Lee. Rebecca's been doing a lot of work on the book that's coming out with Prog. It's probably maybe by the end of the year, right? We still have a lot of time left. But also Rebecca's been doing a lot of work supporting the community. And so I know that it's like many times she will be the first responder to folks asking questions, and often providing very high quality answers. And it makes me feel comfortable knowing that times that I might not be available to help people, that folks like Rebecca are around and are investing their time and energy into supporting the community. Additionally, we have Robert Timmis, who has done a lot of work on various packages, but also has represented this sort of like gold star good contributor badge of really helping with test cases. So like when things go wrong and is reporting a bug or whatever, he'll provide test cases and say like, here's a reproduction of the issue, and provide, and that really I think is very respectful of my time. I understand that's not something that's reasonable for everybody to do or reasonable for every issue. But I do want to say thank you for that very good behavior. So those are the certificates of recognition that we're giving out today, and I will send those to the people that have gotten them, to Rebecca Lee and Robert Timmis. We have another question. All right. Jefferson says, a few days ago, you hinted me to use hooks to do what an ecto multi does. It worked fine in my scenario. To expand on this, how can the hooks use the results of the previous ones? So it depends on the situation. But before action hooks, the change set is an accumulator. So you can set things into the change set context, kind of like assigns, for example, right? So change set context will add something into the context. And then in after action hooks, the accumulator is the result of the action. So you can set metadata on the result of the action, or, something like that. I think there is, it's kind of an interesting question about, should we have you can't modify the change set in an after action hook, but that would actually be a nice feature to be able to do. So you can return a new modified change set and then the result of the hook. That way you could use change set context for all of it. So that would be worth kind of talking about or kind of looking into at some point in the future, just to maybe help make it a little bit more regular for chaining context across your actions. And there is also Reactor, which can be a very good similar tool. Yeah, so right now you can only return OK record from the after action hooks. Actually, am I lying? Is there a way to do this already? Hold on, let me double check. After action fun. Yes, you can't return a change set in an after action function. Let's see. Result. Yeah, you can't. So that's something that if we wanted to support, we would need to make some changes for. However, you can modify the record. So you can use ash.resource.set metadata. That will put a key and value into the resource underscore metadata underscore, right? So you can use the record as the accumulator in that context. So that might be worth looking into as well. Yeah. All right, folks. I think we will call it there. Thank you all again. I guess I already did the whole rigmarole before, but we'll do it again. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate you coming out to Ash office hours, and I will send out some notifications about the next one. Yeah, thanks again to the folks who earned those certificate of recognition. We're going to keep doing that each month. We started that last month. We're going to keep doing it. So yeah, I'll see you all around. Happy hacking.